Who's this?
I'm Brendan from Schenectady,
Hi, Brendan.
and I'm calling because I wanted to provide you an argument for why I don't think that we should label GMOs.
Okay.
And just to preface it, I'm not coming from a libertarian perspective. I like labeling in general. I just don't think at this point labeling GMOs achieves the goal that labeling is supposed to achieve.
What is the goal that labeling is supposed to achieve?
To better inform the public, like I like putting the calories on items in McDonald's and stuff like that because I think the public has a pretty good understanding of what calories are.
Uh-huh.
I don't
Maybe.
think that the current public understanding of GMOs is sufficient to do much to let them know about them via labeling.
Well, I mean, you don't think there's any value in making people aware of? I mean, well, let me ask you this. I mean, from my perspective, the issue is the 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 current regime, the application of GMOs, I think is problematic for the environment, and I think ultimately problematic for our food supply. Now, I don't know if you agree or
Mm-hmm.
disagree with that. I mean, what would I mean? Give me your.
I think your position on GMOs is pretty reasonable. I know you accept the science on it, and you also are a suspect of some of the environmental stuff, and I'm pretty much with you on that in that regard.
But don't you think that there's value in? I mean, frankly, I would like to see a simplification of things like what is dextrose, what is maltose, what is all of those things that are actually corn products, so that there is a greater understanding and a more transparency about our food policies in this country. I think that there's validity there with that. I mean, look, what do you feel about like organic labeling?
Well, organic labeling is pretty poorly pulled off because of the regulations around it. It means something different for every product, and I think that's a good example of where the labeling might lead people to think that those things are not what they are. I'd be more for a more universal standard of organic that's maybe a little more strict.
But okay, all right. So I think we're on to something here. All right. So the execution of that labeling, I would agree with you, is somewhat problematic. But why? Is there any
You mean
evidence? Is
why is
there
the
any
GMO labeling problematic?
No. But why? Why would you? Let's say you could get the perfect organic labeling. Why?
Mm. Well, I think it's better to get it as close to something that is easy for the public to understand so that
No,
the labeling achieves its goal.
no, I understand. But what is the value of if we could get it right? If you and I could come to an agreement on the right way to label something organic, why should it be that way? What's the value of that
Because
label?
that way, so that people can make a more informed decision about what they're buying.
Yeah, but I mean, do you think that non-organic stuff is inherently less healthy?
No, not really. I mean,
So
I think
what's
that
the value of putting?
there's studies that show different ways on different products.
Right.
Specific
Okay.
different products.
So what's the value though of putting organic on the label, in your estimation? If we
So that
could,
people can, so that when shopping, people can make more informed decisions about the things that they're buying.
that's exactly my argument about why we should do GMO labeling.
And I think if there was a better public understanding of what GMOs are and everything, I think that then at that point there would be a good case for putting the label on.
Whose responsibility is that?
That's the government's responsibility.
To educate the public on GMOs.
I think they should. I
Okay.
mean, I generally like
Well, here's
government
why
going out and informing people about things as they do with cigarettes or stuff like that.
here's why I think the GMO labeling is a good idea. Because I want the public to understand what our food policy is. And this may be a bit of a bank shot, but I don't think there's a downside to it. And if labeling GMOs as GMOs forces corporations or the government or public advocates or scientists from illuminating our food policy more, then I am for it. Is it a bit of a bank shot? Yeah, probably. But what's the downside of it?
Oh, I think that there's a couple of downsides. One being that if with such poor public understanding of GMOs, I think that labeling them might confuse and to a lesser extent scare people more than it will actually cause them to become informed about it.
Okay, so if they're scared, what happens then?
Well, then they change their buying habits, which causes fluctuations in the food market that can cause the price of some foods to go up, which does have a tangible effect of hurting and even killing some people in third world countries.
Wait, so it's going to hurt people in third world countries if we
small fluctions in the cost of food tangibly cause deaths in some countries.
Yeah, but we're not talking about labeling
bankers, bidding on or playing games with the cost of food. It causes people to die.
Wait a second. So you're going to have to explain to me how if people change their buying habits in this country, it's going to affect food prices in other countries.
Because changes because the food often comes from some of those other countries, or those other countries still rely on the same markets because they're global commodities to get their food. And so fluctuations in the price of food, more down to the commodities themselves, not necessarily the packaged finished product, those things do cause changes in the price. If the price goes up, less people do eat. I don't think that's a universal reason to never do anything, but I think in this case,
do you think that's a problem with organic too?
I would be totally open to evidence that wouldn't happen.
Do you think that's a case with organic too? I mean, if people start buying more organic, why wouldn't that same dynamic exist in that way?
Because I don't think that the organic label scares people.
No, but it
label
raises the price of the non-organic stuff, right? Or it raises the price of organic food, doesn't it? I mean, there's no...
Well, it causes more demand for the organic food, which should actually drive down the price of organic food and slightly increase the cost of non-organic food.
Well, okay, so non-organic food, wouldn't that hurt the people in these countries, these foreign countries that you're talking about as well?
I think it theoretically could, but that's why I said I don't necessarily think it's a universal reason to never do anything. I think that there are benefits.
I'm sorry.
I think
if that's the best argument, that there is perhaps, and I'm still not quite clear on how this works, that if people change their buying habits in this country, it could hurt the food supplies of other countries. I'm not sure
it could hurt the food supplies of other countries, but it could also hurt, just to make it a little less esoteric, it could hurt people in this country too, because there are people who rely on food being cheap. And fluctuations in the price of food do change the price of food.
Yeah.
For people.
Yeah, I guess. I
don't think this is the universal argument.
Are we seeing that with Cheerios? Are we seeing that with Cheerios? Didn't they just make a decision not to do it? I personally think that making the American public more aware of our food policies has far more benefit than the downsides. I'm not sure I buy into the downsides you're talking about. If there are other reasons, I'm certainly open to them, but I'm just not convinced of the opportunity cost, frankly. But I appreciate.
Well, I can't remember if it was Matt or Michael that made this argument, but he said he wanted GMOs labeled so that he knew what came from these corporations. I appreciate that argument, but I think that we would do that better just by having better labeling policies for what companies are involved in the production of individual food.
I'm not against that either, but I think, if that was on the table, then fine, but it's not. I just don't see the cost of putting the labels on there as being as outweighing the benefits to making people aware of it. I don't understand, but I appreciate the phone call. But I got to say that I just don't understand. This is not about demonizing science. It is about demonizing a policy that has broader implications outside of the constructing of new types of plants. I just don't quite get it. But I appreciate the call. But if you're arguing that Matt or Michael was wrong, that you're on much more solid footing.
But that's also a broad argument. If the whole point of food policy is just to keep commodities cheap, that allows everything under the umbrella we have now, right? That all we subsidize now in terms of big agri practices, way beyond GMOs, but the level of spraying we have, the level of monoculture, the handful of agri businesses and agri companies that get most subsidies, that's what they give in return, theoretically. They keep the price cheap.
Well, that was the
And that
plan,
has-
right? In 1972, you're
Yeah,
going
yeah,
to
that was
subsidize the hell
butts.
out of corn, and Americans are going to have more disposable
Right.
income. Because
Exactly. So the question is, if you want to, and that's a really valid concern, but obviously the whole food system is very unsustainable and very destructive to public health in terms of things like obesity, overconsumption of sugar, and things like that. So then the question is shifting to things like you say, they aren't on the table right now, but more money for things like food stamps, more money for investing in local agriculture and other forms of food distribution. I mean, I'm just saying, as long as the debate is just purely about keeping certain commodities cheap, that goes way beyond GMOs. That opens the door for everything.
yeah, I'm not sure, and I'm not even sure the connection there. But I'd be interested if somebody has something to send me on how GMO labeling is going to significantly increase the price of food. I'm interested in it because I imagine
That's very
someone's going to
theoretical.
respond to that, and if it causes a response that shines some light on food policy, great.